Hold on there,
everybody.
I
Your
got a
man,
truck
Abdul
outside.
Shaheed.
30.
We are going live right now. I just want to let everybody know that make sure you get everybody in. We are going live. We are live every day, every Tuesday, every Monday. Roach Chili Bowl. That's right. Make sure. I need more hearts. I need everybody. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're enjoying yourself, all right?
On me. Go.
Good morning and welcome to Crossroads. This is Roach Brown coming to you live from the world famous Ben's Chili Bowl on historic U Street in downtown Washington, D.C. We come to you the first Tuesday of every month for a live 2-hour breakfast show. This morning we won't have breakfast, we just have what you wish you could have for breakfast. Our guest this morning would be Mr. Carl Racine, Attorney General for the District of Columbia for the first hour. In the second hour, we're doing a special show called Reminiscing about our good friend Petey Green with one of his nephews, Clayton Lee Buff. We'll talk about Petey and his impact and history on this city and around the country. But before we start, this is WPFW, your station for jazz and justice, heard around the world. So we'll start the show with our normal grapevine. And the grapevine is about information that you can use. Last week, exonerees and their family members up from the Innocent Network had a march in Memphis, Tennessee. And the purpose of the march was to highlight and include inadequate representation, the impact of wrongful conviction on families, inadequate compensation laws, the flawed death penalty that puts innocent people at risk of execution, forensic practices that are not based on science, and the pressure for innocent people to plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit. This happened last Saturday in Memphis, Tennessee with the Innocence Network, and there was a big turnout. And this is something that we need to push on our show, because there's 15 chapters around the country of the Innocent Projects in various states whose purpose and mission is to help release those men and women who've been wrongfully convicted for whatever reason. So our hats off to the Innocent Project and their national march that they held last Saturday in Memphis, Tennessee. Now we get to what we call the grapevine, information that you can use. Attorney General Jeff Sessions pushes the death penalty for drug dealers. The Attorney General followed Trump's instructions to seek executions when possible. Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued a memo to federal prosecutors on Wednesday, instructing them to pursue the death penalty in drug-related cases, including dealing in extremely large quantities of drugs. As part of their response to the opiate epidemic, the guidance comes a day after President Donald Trump touted his proposal of executing drug dealers at a speech in New Hampshire with Sessions at his side. Ooh, doggy. A wrongfully convicted man who was paid just $75 after spending 31 years in prison finally gets justice. A Tennessee man who was wrongfully imprisoned for 31 years has been awarded $1 million by the state. In '78, Lawrence McKinney was sentenced to 115 years in jail on rape and burglary charges. He was cleared of those charges in 2008 and was released from jail in 2009. At the time, the Tennessee Department of Correction gave him $75 to start all over again. Since his release, McKinney has been on a mission to clear his name. But before he could get the $1 million payout, the maximum allowed under Tennessee law, he needed a formal exoneration from the governor's office, but it wasn't easy to obtain. Fortunately for McKinney, 62, and his lawyer, the final call rested with Governor Bill Haslam. And last December, 5 days before Christmas, Haslam went against the recommendations of the parole board and exonerated McKinney. The $1 million will be split into an initial sum of $353,000, said the lawyer, which would mostly go towards legal fees and the call for McKinney. The remaining $647,000 will be divided up in monthly payments of $3,300 a month. Laurie said the payment is guaranteed for a minimum of 10 years, and if McKinley dies, his wife, who was a pen pal while in jail, will continue to receive his monthly checks. Ooh, doggy, if that don't get you, that's what you call some jiggy boogie. 31 years and you get $75 after 31 years. Oh, excuse me, that's terrible. Well, good morning, Mr. Racine.
Good morning, Mr. Brown.
And joining me is my co-host, Nikichi Taifa, Esquire, an attorney, activist, all around involved in everything. And Nikichi, thank you for being our co-host every first Tuesday of the month.
Thank you for always having me, Roach, and good morning, Attorney General.
It's great to be with you, Nikichi.
This is an interesting show because this position of Attorney General was new in Washington, D.C. And for our listening audience who don't understand or know what the intricacies are from the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General, the Inspector General, we'd like for you to explain what the purpose and the role is of the Attorney General in Washington, D.C. and how it impacts. Just explain that first and we'll get into the other questions later.
Okay, let me just say that as a 50-year plus Washingtonian.
You older than me?
I was a little older than you, Roach. And if people had the fortune of watching this show, they'd see it in your face and they'd see it in my face. But I've been following you for a long time, and I very much appreciate the great work you've done, uplifting the lives of so many Washingtonians and giving us the information that we need nationally to understand the greater trends that really are going on in the country. Now, as to the Office of Attorney General, you correctly noted that prior to 2015, the Office of Attorney General was not an independent office. It was instead a subordinate office underneath the mayor. And so the 2014 election, an election in which I'm very privileged to have won, was the first time that the Office of Attorney General became an independent office directly accountable to the residents of the District of Columbia. That's a big deal.
So you don't report to the mayor or the city council, nobody?
You know, I have a lot of respect for the mayor, and we certainly collaborate and coordinate. I don't report to the mayor. With respect to the council has oversight authority, as they should, over our office. But what we do day in and day out is we give advice to the agencies in the city, including the mayor and the council. We defend the city in lawsuits filed against the city. And what I'm very excited about is we pursue our public interest mandate to do the right thing by DC residents in several fundamental ways that impact criminal justice, particularly juvenile justice. Let me talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
In DC, the Office of Attorney General is the exclusive prosecutor of juveniles in the District of Columbia.
And just, it used to be corporation counsel, is that correct? I'm just remembering back in the day, I never quite understood what corporation counsel was, but I know it dealt with juveniles. Well, what's the difference between that and what you're doing with the Office of Attorney General?
You're exactly right. So we had a name that was a clumsy name, and it was called the Corporation Counsel. We changed our name back in 2006 to that of an Office of Attorney General to be consistent with what the office is in other states. Now back to the juvenile authority. This is a big deal. It's our office that is the exclusive prosecutor of juveniles. The U.S. Attorney's Office, Roach, as you indicated, also plays a role in criminal enforcement of the laws in the District of Columbia. The U.S. Attorney's Office overwhelmingly has the primary authority over adult prosecutions. Now, we play a role in adult prosecutions as well, but only on misdemeanors. Let me talk about the importance of having the Office of Attorney General be the gatekeeper to the juvenile justice system. We take that role seriously, and we know that involvement in the criminal justice system doesn't necessarily equate to the reduction of violence and enhancement of public safety. We also know that by bringing young people into the criminal justice system, you have a pretty good chance of not making things better for them in terms of having them change the course of their lives, but actually you have a pretty good chance of making things worse in terms of those kids recidivating after spending time in the criminal justice system. We're very excited at the Office of Attorney General that we've created a third door for the criminal justice system that is actually apart from the criminal justice system.
That's interesting.
And so what we've done with this door is we've taken now about 2,000 in 3 years, young people who ordinarily would have been fully prosecuted by our office. Instead, we've had these young people agree to submit to psychological assessment, educational assessment, familial assessment, and then based on these evidence-based assessments, we've been able to provide them with services that actually result in their not committing crimes again.
Let me throw this out. I was down at New Beginnings, the juvenile detention facility, about 2 weeks ago, and we broadcast live 3 weeks ago down there. And that was the first time they allowed us inside of an institution. And we went down there, and it blew my mind that all I saw were young black males and black girls. When I left there, a couple of days later, we went to Superior Court. And we went down to Superior Court, and again, all I saw was black defendants, black and brown defendants. And it touched me, and I asked the chief, the former chief, Captain Lanier, why is that all kids, teenagers are rambunctious, they get into stuff, they're mischievous, all of them throw rocks and break cars. But why is it that only black kids are locked up in D.C. or contained or detained in D.C.? And what happened to the white kids?
Well, you ask a terrific question, and the fact is that the overwhelming majority of young people who enter the criminal justice system, the juvenile justice system, are in fact people of color. The reality is that the juvenile justice system is meant to be kind of a place of last resort. And so when kids get involved in mischievous conduct or even criminal conduct, to the extent that they come from homes that are settled, that are in areas that are more wealthy, there's just an institutional bias in favor of not bringing those kids into the system. And so one way to look at what we're doing at the Office of Attorney General with regard to this third door is we're accessing that same kind of resolution, a resolution outside of the system, a resolution that kids who aren't poor, kids who aren't black and brown avail themselves of now to the very kids who need it the most.
But wouldn't it have something to do with where the law enforcement resources are deployed? If they're primarily deployed in people of color communities or disadvantaged communities, then those youth will come to the attention much more so than other youth. The statistics that I've seen show that black and white youth engage in similar, types of inappropriate, shall we say, behavior. But then what happens after that makes the big difference. So how can we close that particular gap if the resources aren't in those other communities? They're not really even coming initially to the attention of authorities.
Well, I mean, Nikichi, I think your example, your statement is a good statement. An example is marijuana prosecution. Mm-hmm. You remember before marijuana was recreationally legal, the reality is that every statistic out there showed that black folks and white folks use marijuana at the same rate. Yet in the District of Columbia, arrests, prosecutions, and sentences were 8 times more, or should I say greater, amongst the brown and the black community. And so there is an institutional, I would suggest, bias that disfavors people of color and also people on the bottom of the economic rung. That's why it's so important for enlightened prosecutors, and I hope to say that our office is one to take into account the disparities and the unfairness of the system and to react to that disparity and unfairness by providing other alternatives that will not re-traumatize young people and forever have them locked in the criminal justice system.
You know, I heard something when I was down at New Beginnings, and we met with Director Clint Lacey and the Deputy Director, Ms. Holly Harper, and they said something that they no longer confine kids at New Beginning unless it's a serious offense. And this policy, we just found out about it, that originated from your office or from the City Council to not to detain our youth unless it's a serious offense, not the lockout for truancy, a little light status offenses per se. Did that come from your shop?
Well, as the prosecutor for juveniles, our office has great discretion in who we charge, who we prosecute, and what we ask for after a finding of responsibility has been made by a judge. What we're seeking to do is exercise our prosecutorial discretion in a responsive way that actually will result in less violence in the community. And more, we're exercising our discretion in favor of community-based programming, not institutional-based programming. And you mentioned Clinton Lacey over
He was just over here.
at New Beginnings. I mean, I've got to tell you, I really think that we're on the cusp of dramatic change in the District of Columbia because of some of the enlightened leadership we have, and Mr. Lacey starts at the top of that, in my view.
You know, I don't usually give out accolades or bananas to people, but Clint, you got a banana? I was just kidding. But Clint is one of them guys who came in from New York, and I've had several meetings with him and his staff, and I've been thoroughly impressed with him. And I just met you today for the first time, Mr. Racine, and I have a policy of a thing called your inner voice, and it's like running your radar up and down somebody. And I ran my radar up and down Mr. Lacey, and I like what I felt coming.
And Roach's inner voice is never wrong.
That's right. And when I met you this morning, sir, and we had a brief discussion, I checked you out, I ran my radar. Y'all call it GPS, instinct, mother wind. I call it my inner voice, and I like what I felt. Then we talked about, you have the gumption and co-jones to hire folk that wouldn't nobody else want to hire. You know, Delbert Jackson used to be the director of the D.C. Department of Correction back in the 70s. Used to encourage the community to hire released prisoners coming out of institutions. And he said, why should we keep asking people to do that if we don't hire them ourselves inside of the Department of Corrections? And I noticed that you're doing the same kind of things. You're hiring folk with criminal records in the office of the Attorney General. That speaks volumes, and it says a lot about your commitment and what you're doing. And that I take my hat off. I would comb it, but I don't have anybody have a pick?
Mr. Brown doesn't need a pick, folks. No, but you know, I got to tell you on that. Let me just tell you our experience in regards to hiring returning citizens is that, to be honest, that category of employee is more focused, more loyal, more hardworking, more results-oriented than, frankly, your average employee. And it stands to reason that if you provide someone with an opportunity that, generally speaking, is not available in society, they're going to dig in extra hard to try to do the best job they can. And the results from our team at the Office of Attorney General is nothing short but spectacular.
And actually, one of your employees was a guest on our show here, LaShawn Thompson, with her phenomenal book, The Wire, and I know she works very closely with SEMA, and you have really put together a spectacular team, and it really is absolutely making a difference here in the District of Columbia. I have another question for you. You mentioned that one of the hallmarks of your office is dealing with the public interest. Can you give an example of some of those things? I don't know if the Terrence Sterling, well, got my brain, settlement would have fallen within that realm, but can you kind of tell about that? And
you know, that's one of the hardest parts of the job as the Attorney General, and that is that, as I mentioned, we have both a public interest mandate, do what's right by the public interest, do the most good, do the least harm. We also have a responsibility to defend the district when it is sued. And so sure enough, in this Terrence Sterling matter, we were prepared to defend that matter in court. I got to tell you, I spoke with Mr. Sterling's lawyers early on and made it clear that the District of Columbia did not have an interest in a long, drawn-out legal proceeding, that we were happy to work hard to reach a settlement that was fair to the district and fair to the Sterling family. In that instance, we were very fortunate to ask the former Chief Judge of the D.C. Court of Appeals, Judge Eric Washington, to serve as our mediator. And I got to tell you, the mediation all happened and resolved itself in less than 24 hours because the Sterlings and their pastor are extraordinary people. And they certainly made us stretch, and we did, I think, the right thing to try to bring some sense of closure. Nothing is going to bring Mr. Sterling back, and the family understood that, and no amount of money can wipe that away, but we're happy to have resolved that in, I think, a fair and just manner for the family.
You know, we had the Sterling, some of their family members on our show a couple of times, and Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and arranged a meeting with the chief of the park police. I mean, this is a separate situation. And the chief of the park police refused to meet with Eleanor Holmes Norton to discuss the issue of the park police killing somebody down in Washington, as well as Terrence Sterling. And our question is that this is happening so much. Last week it was 277 blacks had been killed by cops in America, or shot and killed by cops. And one of the things that I keep asking myself is, why is it we don't see this on TV anymore? There's very few situations of cops killing. Every day, 3 blacks or brown folk are shot and killed by the cops. This is the 93rd day of the month, and it's at 278 blacks been killed. And this has been a has a trouble impact on us. In fact, I'm afraid, Mr. Racine, I've been in prison my whole life. I did 30 years and 4 months of the course of my entire life. And I've never ever, I've been in some of the most violent institutions, maximum security in the country, and insane asylum. And I've never felt the fear that I feel now when I walked down the street and the cop pulled me over like 2 months ago, and I almost had crapped on myself, man. I was sitting there shaking.
Sure.
Because you can lose your life, and it's not but because of how serious the traffic offense may be or whatever. You know that you got somebody who has total control with a weapon. And if his biases come to the surface or whatever, you can lose your life. Is there anything that you can tell our listeners, Mr. Rasheen, that what they could do to reduce that fear or to try to know what their rights are? Because even if you tell the cops what your rights are, they feel that you're too smart, you're an up at the end.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
I do. I understand exactly what you're saying. And of course, now with the advent of the body camera videos, we're seeing truths and realities that we hadn't seen before, and that was always criticized as coming from the mouths of criminals and liars. And so now we're seeing, sometimes in black and white, sometimes in color, the misconduct of officers. We're seeing, you know, a mentality that is a warrior mentality that is too quick to the trigger. And I really think that the way out of this was thoughtfully begun and really proffered and implemented and with a plan by the Obama administration. You remember the 21st Century Policing Initiative. It collected law enforcement authorities, respected Charles Ramsey, our former police chief here in DC, and they came out with a 10-point plan that would actually, I think, go a long way for reducing the violent interaction between law enforcement and citizens, particularly people of color. Unfortunately, the administration today and the current Attorney General Sessions, they don't have any interest in moderating police conduct nor encouraging police to move away from the warrior mentality and move towards a peace or guardian mentality. Instead, you see it in the president's jokes, where he is actually encouraging police to batter or harm suspects, people who haven't been convicted or tried of a crime. It's the exact opposite approach that's necessary.
So, Attorney Racine, let me just take this just a bit further, if I may. I don't know if this is, it probably isn't under your jurisdiction, but we're entering the 6th day of protests and sit-ins at Howard University. And I am just extremely concerned, without saying anything whatsoever with respect to the merits or non-merits of the protest. I'm just extremely concerned that there might be some type of potential for violent outcomes should the A building, administration building be taken by force. Does this fall within your public interest or anything within your jurisdiction? And if so, what are you or what would your office be doing to try to ensure that we don't have that warrior type mentality to resolve this scenario?
Yeah, I think first it would be a tragedy if the nonviolent, merit-based protest that the students have, I think, quite responsibly led results in violence. I don't think there's any need for heavy-handed approach here. This matter is going to resolve itself by both parties talking to each other. Now, in terms of what my office can do, my office actually doesn't have the criminal jurisdiction over something of that sort, but we do have a bully pulpit, and I'm going to use that right now.
Okay, let's
by
use it.
Emphasizing,
Come on and use it, brother.
emphasizing continued, peaceful, and responsible protest.
We're going to get ready to take a break, and we'll be right back. We got a mic in the audience. We'll take a few questions. In fact, Mr. Racine brought a few of his staff with him, and we will address a couple of those issues from the audience. When we come back, we'll take a break, and we'll see you back in a few seconds. Not yet. Well, I'm just premature.
That's all right.
You know what I mean?
So can I follow up on something else if that's okay? Walmart. Let's look at
Yes.
one of the issues in terms of people being involved in criminal justice is because there are no jobs.
That's right.
There are no opportunities out there, and I know in Ward 8 or wherever, I presume, there could have been a possibility for significant economic infusion into that area, but Walmart rolled out. So can you tell us about that and just what your office did as a sanction to?
Sure. So, so Walmart wanted to come into D.C. several years ago. It was going to be one of their first entries into a large urban environment. The then Mayor Gray, sought to ensure that if Walmart...
We'll take a break.
Yeah,
We're good.
Mike went on and did it.
Okay.
When you said
I'm sorry.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We'll be right back. Okay.
We can just pick up.
Okay.
Who you want to come on first? How about the
let's-
violence prevention piece?
Yeah, so Seema, and Lashana, you guys, I think
Stand
you
to the
can...
mic. One of y'all come over here.
Yeah. So one come to the mic,
Seema and LaShawn.
and I think you got some questions for him.
Yeah. Come on, LaShawn.
So you can, so Seema is really good on the ACE program. Shania is excellent on everything, especially our restorative justice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, good.
Come on, LaShawn over here. Yeah, Seema, you get on the mic there. You know how to do this, lady. You've been here before. Come on, where you go. Come on over here. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
So should we pick up with it? Yeah.
we let you go
Finish,
quick?
because I don't know how much I want to work out.
And I'll
Okay.
throw it to about the violence, the
Okay.
restorative justice piece.
Perfect.
Yeah. Where did you get that banana from?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was hoping I was going to have some pancakes. I don't know what happened
Looks like an
today.
only child there.
I know.
1 minute.
Soft.
1 minute. Yes, ma'am. Give us some water.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
This is how it's real bad.
Say mistake, if you can come on. New
You
Zealand.
know how to say
I'll make sure your staff.
I appreciate that. Love it.
We're back. This is Roach Brown coming to you live from the historic Ben's Chili Bowl in downtown Washington, D.C. We bring you this show every first Tuesday of the month. We do a 2-hour special, a live breakfast show. This morning we don't have the breakfast. But next month, please come back and we'll do a live 2-hour show. This is your station for Jazz and Justice. We're joined on the panel this morning with Mr. Carl Racine, Attorney General for the District of Columbia. My co-host is none other than the world famous and renowned banana lady, Nakichi Taifa. And joining us now, Mr. Racine, you want to finish up your last comments before we went to the break, sir?
I did. So on the Walmart deal, to make a long story short, the District of Columbia took the position that Walmart promised to open a couple of stores in underserved areas, in particular Skyland in Ward 7. Walmart took the view that it didn't have a contract to do that. We engaged in legal discussions. We considered filing a complaint, and thankfully we were able to resolve the matter without filing a complaint. Walmart has agreed to pay the district $1.3 million as a result of our disagreement. I'm here to tell you that the case would have been a tough case to establish in court, and I think the resolution was a fair resolution in the end.
Did Walmart pull out?
They pulled out. I'm not sure that we did everything that we needed to do to, dot the I's and cross the T's on the contract. So it would have been a hard case for us to prevail in court.
Joining us is LaShawn Thompson Hale, no stranger to our station, who's been on the show several times. And I consider her a good friend, you and your husband. We want to talk about this Juvenile Justice Restorative Justice Conference and then the ACE Diversion Program. One of the things that we talked about last week with Clint Lacey, the director of the Department of Youth Rehabilitative Services, was the Credible Messenger Program, but it was another component that just slipped in called a Trauma Response Unit, which is comprised of returning citizens. And whenever somebody gets shot or injured in Washington, they run to that particular spot and do whatever they can to provide assistance and to prevent retaliation and vindictiveness in these situations. And I know that you've been involved in a lot of these efforts with the WIDE, LaShawn, and I'm glad to see you with the Attorney General. You don't have no handcuffs on.
Absolutely not.
You want to tell us what you're doing with the restorative justice piece?
Yes, thank you, Roach, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for being here this morning with us. So as you were speaking, I was thinking about last night. We was reflecting on the ceremony we had last night where everybody who has been trained in restorative justice came together to sort of celebrate that accomplishment. And I just thought about Ivy and Salim Hilton wanted to bring them into the space because they're doing an amazing job with training all of us, like you spoke about the trauma response team. You have the Institute of the Black World, Alliance of Concerned Men, the Credible Messengers, all these great people who come from the community, who have, a lot of them who have changed their lives, been through the transformation process, and want to help walk other people through that process and help the community heal in the process. In any case, I think the Hiltons are doing a great job in preparing us to do this restorative justice work and become a restorative community. They spoke a lot last night about, self-care and leadership and being informed, trauma-informed, and so we've been able to facilitate restorative justice conferences at the OAG office with youth who have caused harm in the community, where they are sitting down and having conversations with people who have been harmed by their actions. And one of the things that I can say that I've been pleasantly surprised about is how victims, who you would consider victims in the traditional sense, have been empowered to sort of come face to face with the person who has caused them some harm and to get their self-esteem back, because they have to go back into the same community and still go to school together and still live together. And we want them to be able to do that and hold their head up as young people and not feel like they have to avenge what has happened to them or be shunned or shamed. We living in the age of social media, so almost every fight, unfortunately, is recorded. And so we're not just dealing with like one-on-one fights. And even though I think it's safe to say they're not serious fights in the sense of injuries, but we're talking about girl fights where there's 6 girls fighting 6 girls all over a boy or all over some misunderstanding where if they just get an opportunity to sit down with responsible adults who can, be that moral force, help them think it through, they can actually resolve these issues, and the person who is harmed can actually walk away feeling satisfied that the result was fair and just.
So this is mantra that goes something like those closest to the problem or closest to the solution. And it appears as if this is what you've brought to the Office of Attorney General. I'm just curious, are there other initiatives or anything along those lines that those of us who have never been on the inside might never have thought of, that have become part of the initiatives of either District of Columbia or the Office of the Attorney General? I know we have the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens and the NEAR Act, and I'm just wondering how much of this came from those who were directly impacted.
I think it's safe to say in DC, we pretty much led the effort long before I came home. I've only been home for 7 years now. So way before we was talking about credible messages and things of that nature, we had peaceaholics and again, the Alliance of Concerned Men and people that like grandmas and aunties in the communities that are, you know, settling domestic violence disputes, you know, taking care of children who have incarcerated parents. So for us, they're our violence interrupters. And now I think as a community, we're just trying to figure out how we can bring it all together and make it more collaborative and cohesive so that people are not duplicating efforts, but that we're actually working together. Because it's a lot easier when we work together.
If I can, you know, again, I think we are at a real sweet spot in the District of Columbia with inspired leadership. We talked about Mr. Lacey at DYRS, the Council of the District of Columbia, and passing the NEAR Act, Chairman McDuffie, Chairman Allen, and the mayor signing that and now implementing it. We are on the verge of really applying evidence-based solutions to reduce violence. Let me give an example of an evidence-based solution that was not based on any evidence at all, but was popular. Way back when I was growing up in the 80s, there was a program called Scared Straight. Scared Straight, you know, it brought young folks like me in the 7th and 8th grade into the Lorton Jail and other jails throughout the country. That program was very hyped, was thought to be successful. Guess what the statistics show? What? Statistics show that 70% of folks who participated in the Scared Straight program actually committed crime afterwards, and then would do it again and again. So there was a process and a program that had some appeal, but the evidence showed it didn't work. What's going on now in the District of Columbia is that we're focused on evidence-based innovative practices like restorative justice, like ACE diversion for kids, that actually work to reduce recidivism of young people. And so we're doubling down on evidence-based solutions that reduce violence.
You know, this brings to mind what I call the credible elephant project or concept. I mentioned this earlier on a previous show, that in Africa, all of the female elephants that were tusks were being killed. And that left a lot of orphan young elephants. And they in turn started destroying communities, killing people, stomping them. Somebody had the vision to bring in 3 old bull elephants. And they brought them in less than 30 days. All the damaging stopped, the kids stopped, the elephants, the young elephants stopped ravaging the village and killing food. And that concept is how we watch animals and how animals deal with their particular problems. That same concept is applicable with the credible messenger. One of the things that came out of the credible messenger program I liked was that Mr. Lacey said that not only do the youth receive a mentor support, but the parent, the grandparent. And we're talking about, I was a part of that Scared Straight back in the 70s in Lorton. And one of the issues that we talked about then now is jobs reduce crime. We bring them in, scare them, intimidate them, and threaten them, and they scared for a few minutes. But when they come back out, they're broke. They ain't got no job. They can't go to school. They can't buy no new clothes. They can't feed themselves. So jobs reduce crime and stop this violence. And that's one of the components that I was really impressed with Clint Lacey and them. And when you're talking about this ACE project, Sean, you want to give us a little more background on how this ACE tie into this create jobs? Because jobs is the Mr. Racine, I don't care if you got a professor from Harvard, from the Pope, from the Vatican. If a folk can't bring bread home, if the daddy is not a breadwinner and he can't even bring a crumb to the house or to the table, and you got crumb snatchers they're waiting to eat and they can't get a crumb, I don't care what techniques we use to try to threaten or intimidate and get them on the right track, when that wears off and the reality sets in that I'm hungry,
Yes.
I have nowhere to go. And you got kids now sleeping. Our homeless population for youth is breaking off the chart. We got so many kids sleeping in the streets, walking up and down with nowhere to go and nothing to do. So jobs, and this is an effort that y'all are doing with the ACE program, the Incredible Messenger. We need projects like it, but not only we need men like you, Lacey, folk who are not afraid to take a stand, to do something, to make a difference in the lives of folks, because these are our tomorrows that we're talking about.
And there are tomorrows, there are talented young people. They're coming sometimes from circumstances where they themselves have been the victim of violence. They experience violence on a regular basis, and the science tells you that young people coming from those situations are indeed in a state of trauma that needs to be first recognized, second treated, and then supported. And where the ACE diversion program really brings it home is by identifying the particular types of trauma a young person is going through, then matching that up with the services that they need to overcome that trauma with resilience. So yes, the ACE diversion program, in 3 years, over 2,000 young people have gone through that diversion door. I'm happy to say that nearly 80% of those young people, after getting the right services, have not been rearrested. That is massively significant.
We're going to open up the mic. We got a mic in the audience. If someone in the audience wishes to ask a question of Mr. Racine or LaShawna or our panel, please feel free to do so.
And so while they're coming up, come on up to the mic. Let me just.
Don't all rush it. Let
me just say, and please come to the mic. I'm a lifelong resident of the District of Columbia, but I work in my 9 to 5 on the federal level. And one of the things that upsets me most is that all of the great and positive things that are happening right here in the District of Columbia, most folk out of the side of D.C. don't know anything about it. The money is not coming into D.C. We're not looked at as a model of best practices and evidence-based strategies and the like. Whereas we, in fact, are the progenitors of a lot of this. I don't know how many other cities have an Office of the Returning Citizen. I don't know how many others really hire intentionally, formerly incarcerated people and the like. So I just want to know what can be done to make sure that we in the District of Columbia are on the map, so that the foundations and so that the the mayors and governors and all can look here and take. A lot of people don't realize that we don't have a cash money bail situation here in the District of Columbia. You don't really hear that out there when all the talk is about reforming the cash bail system. So I just want to,
Well, look, I think your point's well taken. There are very significant, innovative approaches that have taken root in the District of Columbia. The money bail issue, we've not had that for over a decade now, and other states are starting to follow the DC model, as well as the restorative justice and other innovative approaches that we're taking on a daily basis. I can tell you that the Office of Attorney General is seeking to promote this not only within the District of Columbia, but also beyond. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, I hosted 9 other attorney generals and even more attorney general offices throughout the country with a conference focused solely on evidence-based solutions to reducing violence.
So let's just make sure that we're communicating, because I can really help to amplify that as well. I'm glad to hear that happened. So she's trying to keep me on with the Justice Roundtable.
We got a question from your name, please, and your question.
Derek Johnson, and my question is just with regard to youth and youth of color, and also impoverished persons in the district. Is there any conversations happening with regard to fare evasions on WMATA, and any conversations you're having with WMATA, particularly about how to reduce those intimidation tactics that go on with police and in the WMATA system?
Sure. I think that's an excellent question, and obviously it's been a source of conflict and tension, along the roadways and railways in the District of Columbia. What's important to note, I think, from a prosecutorial viewpoint is that those fare evasion type cases are essentially perfect cases for us to direct into our diversion efforts. Why? Because oftentimes the fare aversion case is the first or second experience that a young person has within the criminal justice system. If that experience isn't directed in the right way, then you can be guaranteed that they're going to be more violent, more disruptive experiences. And so what we're doing at the Office of Attorney General is we are directing those types of matters to be treated in a restorative justice or service-based approach versus a punitive approach. And what we find, again, is that those approaches, service-based or restorative-based, end up reducing recidivism. So that's how we're tackling that issue, and we think it's important for other prosecutors and law enforcement to include the Park Police and the Metro Police to also direct those cases in a way that doesn't engage the criminal justice system.
Okay, we have another question from the audience. Your name and your question, please.
My name is David Bratton, aka DC Lou.
DC Lou?
Yes, sir. I'm a Lou Rawls impersonator.
Yeah.
One of the questions I have is, when I was hearing Roach Brown talk about that he had been fearful at times, riding in his car not knowing what's going to happen. And they talk about the cameras. It doesn't make any difference if they're not turned on. You know, and that kind of bothers me. I'm looking at it that we're sitting here and you're not actually looking that we have a big problem here. And it should be on a national level addressed, because right now, like you said, countless people are dying and we're doing visuals, we're doing all that, but it's not taking care of the problem. I'm a strong believer, and I tell my sons and stuff, that if you go anywhere and people don't receive you, don't spend your money. But in this case, we need to do more than just talk about trying to get these police to do right. You take a guy that's been bullied all his life, he get that job, now he can show some muscle, and that means showing, you know, giving back what he was getting. Sure. You know, so it just some psychological profile need to be ran, or they need to take a test or something all over, or not, the problem's gonna get bigger. Thank you.
Now, look, I think you're making a very, very important case, and perhaps, you know, some of us are a bit too complacent in waiting for the federal government to take the lead. In fact, 90% of law enforcement activities are state and local based, not federal. So there's no reason why states and localities can't proceed with the 21st century policing model that the Obama administration set forth. And I'm going to commit myself today, now from the perspective of the District of Columbia, to more strongly advocate for those principles in the 21st century policing in the District of Columbia and beyond.
I'd like to add this before we take our next question. I've been committing crimes when I was 8 years old. I'm 74 now, plus tax. And the issue is, back in the day when you were arrested, you didn't see this Rambo approach when you walk up to, you see somebody on TV and one cop is talking to the suspect, and automatically you were thrown to the ground or thrown or slammed onto the hood of the car with your arm almost touching your ear, and they tell you, don't resist. How can you not resist when your arm is being broken and your face is slammed into the car, and they tell you that you are resisting arrest, you're assaulting the police, and you're the one that's being assaulted? That tactic of putting your arm up behind your back, almost breaking it, and slamming one's face not only into the car, there's people that have been killed in the process of being arrested by slamming their face into the concrete. That tactic was not in effect back in the 50s, 60s, or 70s. And this approach now, it leads to a lot of folk just instinctively, if your arm is hurt, you can try to pull it down. You're not resisting arrest, you're trying to stop from being hurt. And this tactic needs to be included in that police training, because this whole pressure, putting your foot behind your leg, flipping you, twisting your arm and slamming you into the concrete or to the car, that adds for more problems. They are provoking this, making the situation more deadly than what it initially was.
No, look, you know, you're making a strong case, and the way I interpret what you're saying is that police must always be held accountable. There's got to be greater transparency around that, and police cannot be afraid of what accountability means. Accountability means more trust from the public. Let me give you an example. In the 90s, the District of Columbia had more officer-involved shootings than in New York City, LA, and Chicago.
In the 90s?
In the 90s. You know what happened? Charles Ramsey came in town. He saw the state of the police. He determined that they needed federal help. So he voluntarily brought the feds in, Department of Justice, and signed a consent decree that required all manner of trainings and other accountability. That's why the DC police have seen such significant improvement as a result of Chief Ramsey and then Chief Lanier's willingness to be held accountable. Other law enforcement offices need to do the same thing, and we should never get stale on this in DC. We must always question the police and the conduct and try to ascertain how we might make police and citizen interactions more peaceful. That should be the norm.
Beautiful. We got 5 minutes to go before we end the show. We got one last question. Your name and your question, please.
Ben Baker. So I am, thank you for speaking with us. I'm a new resident here in DC, recent college graduate. And as you can see in our nation, young people are taking a leadership role and stepping up and making changes recently for with my March for Our Lives. And my question to you is how, as you know, new residents, and I've come across a lot of young college-educated people who want to help in the city and want to help the youth, how can we get involved? Is there a way through your program that we can get involved?
Absolutely. So, you know, the first thing is I'd ask you just to stay around a little bit after the show so we can exchange our contact information. What we are doing in the restorative justice space requires a lot of energy and commitment from folks. And we'd be happy to bring in people on a pro bono or volunteer basis who could, you know, help us in that regard. So the Office of Attorney General is open for business and volunteers. In addition, there are any number of wonderful grassroots organizations, not-for-profits, that are impacting positively the life of kids. For me, the most important thing that a young person needs is to understand, embrace, and love the beauty and wonder of books. Literacy programs are incredibly important. The data shows where kids learn how to read at the right age early on and start reading more, guess what? Attendance skyrockets up, graduation skyrockets up, and of course, lawful conduct skyrockets up. So I look forward to talking with you after the show.
We're at the close of the show. You want to give us a couple of closing comments? We got LaShawna, you can take a minute or so. We got 3 minutes to go. You want to take a minute? Then we let Mr. Roach close it off. Okay.
In closing, I just wanted to mention that this week on Thursday at 1 at the DC Office of the Attorney General, we're having a brainstorming session on violence interruption, and we've invited various partners throughout the community that are doing the work, the Institute of Black World, Credible Messengers, and other entities will be there, and we plan to just talk about how we can better work together to achieve our mission of reducing violence and improving public safety and reducing mass incarceration simultaneously.
Thank you, LaShawna Thompson, ELA. Thank you.
Sure. I just want to say, you know, Roach, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to talk a bit about the Office of Attorney General and what we're doing in the criminal space. In particular, again, focused on evidence-based innovations that actually reduce violence.
Nikichi, we got a couple more minutes.
Well, I just want to say kudos to everything that you all are doing over there at the office, and I like to do whatever I can to help to uplift the great work that's coming out of your office and the great stories, and really look forward to much more innovation in the future as well. So thank you.
Seema, you got
SEMA.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, a lot of our innovation comes from the kind of people that we're able to attract to the Office of Attorney General. Seema Gajwani is a well-known and highly regarded national figure in the area of juvenile justice and crime reform. Go ahead, Seema.
Go ahead, Seema.
Thank you. We're really proud. I'm lucky to work for an Attorney General like Mr. Racine, because he's given us the support to think about how we can change the Office of the Attorney General's in a way to make it transformative for young people, transformative to the justice system, even transformative for the prosecutors who we work with. We want all of our prosecutors to see their jobs as problem solvers, to address conflict and solve conflict, to restore people who've caused harm as well as victims. And the Restorative Justice Program, which Attorney General Racine launched in 2016, has been a great example of that. And we have facilitators like Lashana who do extraordinary work. I just wanted to mention that one of some of the things that we do with restorative justice is we take on cases where young people have caused harm to victims, and we've had several cases where the victims have been police officers. And Carl was actually able to sit in on a restorative justice conference with a young person who caused a serious injury to a police officer, and the conversation between the police officer and his family and the young person and his family about how to heal, how to move forward was deeply restorative, is my understanding from the folks who were there. And also might be a way forward to think about how to mend community ties between law enforcement and individuals who feel surveilled and oppressed by law enforcement.
You know, that was beautiful. You know, this is interesting. This is the first time, as Keisha said at the beginning of the show, DC is in the forefront of a lot of these new innovative approaches, programs, etc., to deal with violence in our youth. And it's just mind-blowing to see that we're sitting here with the prosecutor, the Attorney General of Washington, D.C., and we're talking about saving lives and reaching our youth. Very few other cities around the country has taken this initiative or this kind of approach. And again, D.C. has been on the cutting edge of a lot of these kind of programs. We're not saying that because you're here. I know you paid me $5 to say that. But this is something that we need to keep and have it replicated around the country. For those folk who are listening in institutions in the country, or around the country, in Canada, whatever, in Germany. And my buddy called me from Germany. He wanted to speak this morning, but we don't have a phone line in. So folks are listening to this show around the world. Please look at what's being replicated and done in Washington, D.C. Here's the Attorney General working with the community. Prosecutors are going out to try to help save lives and reduce violence. That is a total different role that they've normally been associated with. So folks, this is something that we need to get on board and expand and replicate it around the country. And Mr. Racine, I want to thank you for coming in, you and your staff, for sharing this information to make sure that folks realize that this is a total community effort. They're trying to save lives of these kids. So we're talking about young folks' lives who don't have no hope, no future, no nothing. And what you're doing and bringing on with Lashana and other folks who got criminal records, man, that's unheard of. Use it, you know. Nikita, you want to give some closing comments before we get out of here, please?
Well, actually, I just want to say, Roach, I want to thank you. I mean, we're talking about a directly impacted person. We're talking about someone who didn't have the type of opportunities when he was a youth that the district is providing today. But you were able to get a couple of different second chances, and look what has happened as a result. Second chances are so very critical. In fact, this is called Second Chance Month right now in April. Second Chances Month, yeah. And it's just so very critical. You're a living example of that. So I just want to take my hat off to you and thank you for bringing all this great programming on Crossroads. Yeah, so.
Can I borrow your hairbrush, please?
Where's your pick, Roach?
I got my pick. In closing, I want to say thanks to everybody who made this show possible. To the family of Ben's Chili Bowl, Miss Ali and her sons. I mean, they are beautiful folk who allow us to come in and broadcast live from Ben's Chili Bowl, and to have the Attorney General and his staff to come in to the heart of the city and share what they're doing and his staff. This really means a lot to folk who are listening to our kids. I want to say thanks to the Public Welfare Foundation who was enjoying us, the DC Law Students in Court who's having an expungement clinic on April 20th from 10 to 3 at Department of Employment Services on Minnesota Avenue. If you wish to get your record expunged, April 20th, if you missed the information, you can go to expungement at dclawstudents.org for further information. We'll close up. I want to say thanks to our technical crew, Mr. Mike Marcel up at the station, my beautiful wife, Mertine, Jackie Craig, babe, our associate producer, to Jerry Parrish, the folks who helped make this show work, to Shaheed. Give me your pick, brother.
We have a second hour coming on. Make sure folks stay tuned.
But the next hour, we're doing a thing called Reminiscing about Peter Green, a good friend of ours. We got his nephew here, and we're talking about some things about Peter Green going down memory lane. So remember that your inner voice
is never wrong.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you so very much. I will treasure this and make sure that...
knows how to me and Seymour, we used to work together back before she came to your office and all that.
Love it.
Yes, that's good.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. I'm really touched, man. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
We'd like to do a show with you, Chief of Police, and we do a 1 or 2 hour.
Hey, LaShawn, did you get my email about the book? Okay. Hey, can you stand? I will. Do that next hour, then we get a ride back to the office. No, check it out. Look for the
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So we should definitely meet.
How much we got for the break?
It's about 45 miles southeast of Birmingham.
Hey, Jerry. Thank you for the Public Welfare Foundation.
That's what's for me. Yeah.
Soros group.
Excellent. So, look, I think
we're coming back live. Come on, Cleve.
Sir, the partners. Mertine, you and Roach have not responded to my emails about partnering.
I'll do it again.
Okay.
so what I
How are you?
Yeah, I thought
Okay, go right ahead.
I will reach out to you.
Okay.
We'll talk to you.
Hey, what's happening, Nebby? Merry Christmas, Nebby. Yeah, he went to the bathroom. Hold it down until he get here.
Need us to do something.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was. I gotta read up on this. I got 1 minute. See if I can find a trash can.
I'm very much interested in also.
Okay.
Okay. I didn't get a chance to do any social media.
If you lose my call, just call that. Yeah, they all
1 minute.
Yeah, we know exactly. How you doing, man?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm again David Bradley. I'm one of the top Blue Raws.
Yeah, you should sing something.
got 1 minute.
You should have given us a two frames.
Lady Love.
Lord have mercy.
We'll talk till he come out here to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, okay, cool. Let me see Chloe then, because I've seen him before.
He's been on The Wire. He's been on TV before. He's an actor. He's been on several.
Yeah. But I know him from somewhere else.
Stand by.
Coming back live. We're running. Couldn't keep till they come out of the bathroom.
Okay, cool.
Always try to lighten it up if you're under no coach.
Say that again?
Always try to give them something to preach.
Stand by.
Here we go. We're coming back.
I'm gonna count it down, all right?
Who's in the
5,
bathroom?
4, 3, 2,
Welcome back. This is Roach Brown for the second hour of Crossroads. We're coming to you live from the historic Ben's Chili Bowl in downtown Washington, D.C. on U Street. We come the first Tuesday of every month, a 2-hour show from the Chili Bowl. Our first hour was with Mr. Carl Racine, Attorney General of the District of Columbia. The second hour is we're reminiscing about Petey Green, a good friend of ours in the city. And joining us will be one of Petey Green's nephews. The question is, why are we doing a show on Petey Green? Petey and I go back about 40, 50 years when we were in London. He was a special friend. I've been on this show several times, and it just felt something on my heart that we need to do this, because I found out something the other day, Nikisha, that I didn't know existed.
What's that?
There's a Petey Green Foundation.
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware of it until yesterday.
Yes, I know.
You know, I know about the Petey Green Center over in Southeast, the UPO Petey Green Center, but there's a foundation that's promoting educational opportunities for men and women inside of institutions to go to school. But before we start, we always open up with what we call the grapevine, information that you can use. The California Supreme Court upholds controversial law allowing DNA collection upon arrest. In a blow to privacy advocates, the California Supreme Court decided 4-3 last Monday that the state may continue to take DNA from people arrested for a felony crime. Whether it was tried, convicted, or released, you can still take the DNA. The ruling upheld a provision in Proposition 69. The more liberal justices wanted the court to use the opportunity to strike down the DNA program they said affects thousands of innocent people each year, and disproportionately African Americans. Of the 200,000 to 300,000 people arrested in California each year on suspicion of a felony, about 1/3 are either never formally charged or are acquitted. The state's retention of DNA is troubling, not only because of its sheer magnitude, but also because it predictably burdens certain groups, and I wonder what group that would be. Trump appointing judges at rapid pace. 1 year into his presidency, Donald Trump is one of the most successful presidents when it comes to appointing federal judges. Trump has spent his first year rapidly filling Article 3 judgeships at Supreme, Appellate, and District Court levels. One reason Trump has been able to fast-track judges, his Republican Party holds a slim majority in the Senate. Another reason is a little bit of political warfare. Republican senators blocked 36 judicial nominations in President Obama's first 5 years, according to political facts. That's been the grapevine, information that you can use and put in your pipe and chew. Joining us is Mr. Clayton LeBuff, the nephew of Petey Green, and I've known Clayton for a while. I've seen him all around the city. But Clayton, a lot of you might know him when you see him. He worked as a drug abuse counselor at the Bureau of Rehabilitation, and he was a DJ at Ed Murphy's Supper Club, the Sagittarius, the French Underground, the Mark IV, and other dance spots in the nation's capital. He's also had some film credits, include WMAR's Arena Players, The Eagle, The Line, NBC's Homicide: Life on the Street, and HBO's Corner. A lot of you might remember him from The Wire. Good morning and good afternoon, or whatever you want to call it. Welcome, Clayton LeBuff, Petey Green's nephew.
Thank you, Roach Brown. Nice to be here, Nikisha.
Hey, all right.
Go ahead, you want to, and you got Nikisha. Have you met Clayton before, Nikisha?
Actually, I have. He probably don't remember, but I have back in the day. And I have a damn memory lane story to say about Petey, if I can.
Yes, you can.
I mean, you know, and I was a teenager, okay, and I would listen to Speak Up, Dewey Hughes and Kathy Hughes back in the day, and Petey Green was always on there. And this was during the time when we had the dial-up telephones and all like that, and and I used to always carry the phone, because it was a big phone with the wire, into my bedroom to listen, and I had mastered the art of dialing the number and waiting before I dialed the last number to hear the other person hang up so I could get in and raise my question. So Petey always used to say, "Little young sister, who are you? How old are you?" or whatever, because I was asking such I guess, great type questions, but I was just like in junior high school. So I always had a warm spot in my heart for Petey Green, learned a whole lot. He was like you back in the day, Roach. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, on the radio. And so, you know, always glad to have you here. Clayton and The Wire and all the great acting stuff that you've done over the decades.
Been fortunate to be in stories, you know. The stories is the star.
Yeah.
I always felt the story was the star. You know what I mean? And when you got that approach, you know that the stories can have impact. You know, the impact is not so much, you know, you yourself, you're a part of something. You know what I mean? It's a collaborative effort. See what I mean? When you talk about collaboration and collaborative efforts, all kinds of things start to happen. Individuals make their, you know, they make their contribution, as they call it. But collaboration is what it's really all about.
So what type of impact did your uncle or influence did he have on you and the types of roles that you've been playing? Just curious.
It's interesting. I came here for two reasons. One was that my father and Petey were split up. So the story of Petey is one of a lot of our stories, Roach, and you know, fractured families. You had the guests on, you know, just fractured families from the time we've been here in the United States, dealing with fractured relationships based on oppression, you know. So when you have fractured family relationships based on oppression, some interesting things happen to the children. Petey's father was in, you know, what you call in greater confinement. You know what I mean? Ralph Sr., which is the story.
Yeah.
You know, Petey connects to his brother Thad, who would hurt somebody. Thad would hurt a law enforcement officer who was crazy. We have men that don't play. You know, we have men that don't care about somebody with a badge on. We need more of those kind of men. You know what I mean? They said, no, we're going to go. It's going to be a fight. It's not going to be a lot of talk if you straight up just shoot us and kill us down on the street. There's no time for meetings. You know, sometimes you just got to do it. And we were blessed to have ancestors, so Petey would be able to talk. This may not be answering your question, but Petey was able to talk S, as they call it.
You know,
talk a lot of mess, that's the way they say it, because he had a brother that would hurt somebody.
You know, one of the things that for folk who are listening around the country or around the world who don't know anything about Petey Green, Petey Green died in 1984, and he was an American television and radio talk show host, a two-time Emmy Award winner. He overcame drug addiction and a prison sentence for armed robbery to become one of the most prominent media personalities in Washington, D.C. And on his show, Petey often discussed issues such as racism, poverty, drug uses, and current events. But one of the things that I really liked about Petey, I didn't know him before he went to prison. We was in prison. In fact, Petey had an impact on prisons all over the country. When he came out, everybody heard the story about Petey talking the guy down off the water tower. The guy's name was Red Top or Carrot Top. We were down there, and Mayor Walter Washington was the mayor in Washington at the time, and he came to Lawton, and this guy Carrot Top went up on the top of the water tower with some boats, screws, rocks, and throwing them down. And we all stood around, and the mayor had tried to get this guy down. He wouldn't come down. Petey stepped out of the crowd and told the mayor, "I get him down. What would you give me?" They said, "What you want?" "I want parole." They refused to give Petey parole. Petey was so well liked and needed inside the institution, and he kept the institution together. He had his own radio show inside. He took the intercom system and made it a radio talk show host inside the institution. So as a result of that, Petey talked the man down from the water tower, Red Top. They took Red Top out, and Petey got parole. And when Petey came out, and he was on a TV show, and they said, "You saved somebody's life inside of prison." What happened? He explained how he talked this guy down from the water tower. But what Petey said, what they didn't know, it took him 10 minutes to get this guy down from the water tower. But then Petey said it took him 6 months to get him to go up in the first place. And as a result of that, you know, back in the day, when you saved an inmate or guard's life inside a prison, they were more rehabilitative, or they were more understanding, so he got a break to come out of prison. And Petey was able to come out. As a result of that, talking this man off the water tower, all prisons took the water tower from inside of the institution and started placing them outside. Any facility you go to now in the country, you would see the water tower is no longer behind the fence with the inmates, it's outside. Secondly, because he was able to save this guy's life, they changed the policies in institutions that if you save a guard or corrections officer's life or an inmate, you can't get any favorable consideration. You may get 20, 30, 50 days. So behind all the stories you heard about Petey Green saving somebody's life or whatever, it had an impact that prisoners or prison officials used that to tighten up the facility and stop releasing folks for saving somebody's life. And on top of that, he was a personal friend and one of the few people that I trust told he was one of the most honest human beings I met. He was a drunk, a winehead, dope fiend, I don't care what you want to call him. But the bottom line is, you don't judge a man by his worst mistakes. And what he did getting his life together impacted thousands of people. So we now joined this morning with Clayton LeBuff, Peter's nephew, who's been involved in films, radio, TVs, plays, etc. And he's been involved in trying to uplift our community the same way. And Clayton, Lakeisha asked you a question about what impact is it having. My question is, how much is Peter missed from you and your family right now? Not just as a person, but what he did outside of his family to impact particularly our senior citizens.
Well, he's missed along with other family members, I'll put it that way. We don't separate, or at least I don't. As I keep continuing, when I come out to talk about anything, the discussion of individuals sometimes can overshadow a larger situation. So it's a good question that the KJ you asked. I said what I learned from Petey was story, not so much roles. You see what I mean? Not so much trying to be like, what is the story behind your family?
Yeah.
When you say missed, to give you an example, he missed his brother and his family in DC so much. I'm talking about my father. But when I was a youngster, laying down in bed, I would hear cursing late at night on the telephone. My first instinct was, Pops is cursing Mom out. As a child, you know, you're in the housing project, people speak to each other a certain way. You know, we have a way of talking with each other where we have vitriol at each other. We have more vitriol with each other than we have at enemies. You know, we speak to each other in certain ways, you know, disrespectful, out of mood swings and whatnot. So I thought my father was cursing my mother out when I would wake up and hear this cursing. But the next morning, moms would be grinning, getting breakfast together for the kids like nothing is wrong. And I'm like, listen, I heard, and she told me he is talking to his brother in Washington, D.C. They don't really like each other, and they only talk to each other when they get drunk. So that's me as a child. What is the fractured family situation?
Yes.
So what is missed, when I'm asked about anything, what is missed, I try to broaden it out of just Petey's and my family situation that goes on all the time.
You know, when I said at the beginning that he's one of the most honest people I've met, and what I meant was, in me, is that he spoke his mind, and what he felt, he spoke. One day, he and I was in the district building, and Marion Barry, just about a few months before Marion Barry got shot when her office took over the district building, Marion called me over and said, Roach, I want to tell you something, but I don't want Petey Green to know about it. So I told the mayor, well, don't tell me, because if you tell me, I'm going to tell Petey, and I ain't going to lie to you and say I ain't going to tell him, because if you tell me, I'm going to give it to Petey. And I went back and told Petey what Marion Barry said. Sunday evening on radio, Petey came on radio and said, guess what Marion Barry said to Roach? And he just put it all out there. He didn't bite his tongue. No. He didn't hold nothing in. And what's going on right now, he's one of the few, I don't know the correct word to say it, but he didn't tolerate no foolishness. He didn't care who you was. If you lied, if you was deceptive or being a fake or whatever, he didn't tolerate that. You went on this radio show or TV program and you lied or you said something that wasn't true, he would call you out on the air and say that ain't true and you're lying. And to have somebody to be that honest and that real and to miss him and what he did for our community, man, it is. I meet people today. In fact, while he's on the air, I got 2 calls from a lady who's supposed to be one of Peter's sisters. I'll share a name with you when I get finished off the air. And when she heard about the show, she wanted to know, can she call him? A couple of folks called at home. what can we do to contribute to the show on Petey Green?
The first thing I would ask people to consider is to pick up a book by Lerma Rackley.
Yeah.
Lerma Rackley wrote a book on Petey and again the larger family situation. At the time that Petey was on the air, right, there were things that were going on in Washington, D.C. as they've gone on in the 60s. As I say, storytelling. Petey was a storyteller. He was a trickster. He was a trickster from the African, we have to live by our wits, right? So when you're under different conditions, your father is in Alcatraz. A lot of men who miss their father, they try to act strong, but it affects them deeply. That's something, again, that restorative justice and others and people are dealing with, healing different aspects of how does a young man feel when his father is locked up and he doesn't see him? How does a young man feel when his brother is taken away from him? My father's 1 year older, right? And they don't get along, but they're trying to understand a fractured historical. Some people call it post-traumatic slavery syndrome.
Yes, indeed.
You see what I mean?
But you call it something else.
What you call it?
Piss.
Yeah.
And Petey probably wouldn't even have believed in it or said he wouldn't. He'd try to rectify it. It was a funny story because he was considered by some a comedian.
Yes.
But you know how that goes. Comedians can be very witty and very sharp and very intelligent. And they can also have solutions to problems by making you laugh at yourself or laugh at a situation and then rise above the situation. A good comedian. But now it's almost like just say anything nasty and terrible and you can get. But a good comedian is like a psychiatrist. They're from the acting school, the oral tradition school, the griot school. They can tell a story and they can make it funny. And with me, it was kind of funny. He called my father one time. We were sitting at the table when I was living with him. He called my father and said, why you have this square ass nigga here living with me? Because there were certain things that I wasn't down for. Like if he was asking me to shine his Cadillac and be a valet, I said, I'm not here to be a valet. I'm my own man. I was 19 years old, 18, 19 years old. I don't follow men. I follow my own instinct, my inner voice. So when you have that kind of strength at 19, but somebody's trying to tell you, this is hip or this is that, I got that in New York. I was raised at 19 years old. If somebody tells you, let's hit a parking meter. I had friends that had keys to parking meters. Try to imagine that, young man. But they're telling me to be the lookout man, and I'm like saying, hey, y'all go ahead and do your thing. I'm peace, I'm cool. And brothers go to jail a lot of times because they can't say no. That's the damnedest thing in the world. If you're a young man and you can't tell another young man that you're not down for anything, and then they try to ridicule you because you're not down, that's the sign immediately. That's the immediate sign that those people are not good for you. Because if they're telling you to take a hit or something and you don't want to, that's the immediate sign if somebody's trying to continue to make you ridicule you, to make you do something that they want you to do. And you just say, I'm cool, and they turn on you, that's the immediate sign to get busy and leave those people alone.
He was, for those folks who are listening around the country and around the world, Petey was an unusual individual. I mean, he came from the streets, came from the hood. I call it, he came from beneath the hood. And what Petey did and the levels he raised, that he achieved. One day, Vince Lombardi was coaching the Washington Redskins. And Petey was invited to the Washington Redskins annual luncheon. And he got up on the stage and said, boy, he scared the place to death. He got up on the stage and said, Vince Lombardi is a mean cracker. And everybody jumped and looked up and said, what is he saying? What is this fool getting ready to do? And he talked about Vince. He said, but let me tell you something. Vince Lombardi is a winning cracker. And he's a man. He didn't take no bull crap. Petey went in the White House. Everybody he spoke, he stayed himself. He didn't no-toe or bow down or kiss nobody, but he did it growing up. But when he reached his plateau and got finished with drugs and alcohol and found out the role he played in the community and how people respected him, uplifted him, trusted him, believed in him, and if somebody had a problem, they would call him. Even though he couldn't solve the problem, he would make sure that they get some help. One of the things, I like to talk about Petey because we was in Lawton together, and when you went to solitary, I wanted to go to solitary with Petey. When you go to the hall with him, he could talk for 15 days and don't say the same joke or toast to signifying monkey, honky-tonk bud, Dorella DuFontaine, these long toasts.
Oh, yeah.
He had committed so much to memory that for 15 days, when you go to solitary and Peter was in the next cell down the hall, you could sit there and you would laugh and cry the whole while you in solitary. You know what I mean? And I never met somebody who had a memory that if he met you 10 years ago, he would tell you what you had on, what size shoe, what color shoes you had, the hat, what time of day it was, where he met you at. He had a phenomenal memory and always said, I don't have but a 3rd grade education.
So,
it was
you know,
a jiggy boogie.
Roach, you know, he really knew the community. I mean, this is April 3rd, and, you know, tomorrow's April 4th, the day of the assassination of Reverend Martin Luther King. In fact, we're sitting in the historic Ben's Chili Bowl, which was the only institution that was open all night where the rebellions was going on. But my understanding is that Petey, during this time, took to the airwaves and was really instrumental in helping to quell the disturbances and all like that was going on. Because people listened to him. Just as people came in here, people would listen to him. He had this like magical quality. And I was just a little girl back then. I mean, but you know, but he really impacted me greatly because I listened to the radio, WOL 14. Well, I guess it's WPMW wasn't around way back then, so whatever.
You know, the voice. You know, the voice of the heart. You know, when you come from your heart and you tell the truth or whatever, it can cause people to react one way or the other. If you hear the truth, we all hear different truths about ourselves that we may not like. Truth is what's interesting. Actually, there's 3 truths. There's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But when you hear a truth, and Petey would be the kind of person that could bring a truth out, and it would cause to rock you one way or the other, right? He was always quelling disturbances. That's where sometimes stories tend to get interesting.
And he couldn't fight a lick.
Before, yes, that's called restorative justice, right? Before the Martin Luther King, what they call I call them uprisings, you know, because people are uprising. Because they will kill you, oppressors will kill you whether you're peaceful or you're a self-defender. I tell young people all the time, the name of the party was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That's the name of the party. It's not the Black Panthers. Black Panthers is what's used to get people to look at the outward. But it was called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. And in the movie that they did for Petey, they put a black turban or a black tam on his head to act like, you know, he was into the activism. So the movie is another discussion that we can have.
What movie? Talk to Me?
Talk to Me, and it's another one called Adjust Your Color. It was a documentary. In fact, part of the movie, Adjust Your Color, was shot here inside of the Chili Bowl with Miss Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, and a few other folk. And it's available on the internet. We're going to take a break, but before we take a break, I want to share with you one little story, one of Petey Green's little jokes, saying that this guy was in court, and the judge said, "Where do you live?" The judge said, "Where do you live?" And the guy said, "Here and there." And the judge asked him, "What kind of work do you do?" And he said, "A little of this and a little of that." So the judge said, "Take him out." And as he was taking him out, he said, "Hey, Your Honor, when would I get out?" And the judge said, "Sooner or later." We'll take a break and be right back with Clayton LeBuff, Petey Green's nephew. And before we take the break, just want to add something else, that we're talking about an icon, somebody who's made a tremendous impact. He's been gone over 20-some years. And would you believe he still has an impact? And I'm sorry to say that nobody's picked up one of the main pieces of Petey to talk about our senior citizens. They are catching hell, folks. Our seniors have to make a decision whether they're going to buy food or medicine, and they're starving. We had a previous show about credible messages. We need to have credible messages for our seniors, for our grandparents, because that was one of the closest things to Peter's heart. He always called his mother, his grandmother, Aunt Pig. And to Aunt Pig and other seniors, we need to, who's listening to the show, let's go back and do something for our seniors. They need us, they miss us, and you think we're catching hell, the seniors are catching double hell. So we'll take a break and be right back with Clayton LeBuff, the nephew of Petey Green, and my co-host, Nakichi Taifa, the Firebrand. Boy, you something else, lady.
I'm following after you, Roach.
We'll be right back after this break.
There was a story I remember when I first got here. When I first got here. Oh yeah, with the football team.
Hold on, I'll be right back.
Yeah, he had all kinds of stories, didn't he?
There's a story where when I first got here, he was asking me if I like seafood. Maybe I could share that story.
Yeah, share the story.
Yeah, he told me, I just got here. He picked me up at the Greyhound bus. He took me to the wharf. And the venture over there at that wharf told me I was in for a ride. I just arrived. I had never heard of Kenny Red. So I put two and two together.
She's just cold. I think she was married to Thad, a woman, somebody.
Wow. Yeah, people are listening, because incarceration touches almost all of our lives. Incarceration is
How much time we got?
Okay, how much time we got? Minute and a half.
Okay. Well, that was my bad. I mean, I should be able to do a show once a month, really round table. He, Rudy Yates, and what's this other guy from Virginia? And we talked about the 3 to 5 top stories in D.C. that happened in that month. And we did it on WOL, then we went to the TV station and did it.
I need to a little closer to you.
a little closer to the mic. Okay. Yeah.
Hey! Hey, man!
And Don Williams is going to come in. He's an LSB member. Get ready. He's going to promo the comedy night that we're having at Westminster Church on Thursday. He'll be on here. 30 seconds.
Already.
Call the ball. 3, 2.
We're back. This is Roach Brown coming to you live from the historic Ben's Chili Bowl in downtown Washington, D.C. We're on WPFW 89.3 FM, your station for jazz and justice. WPFW is heard around the world. For all our listeners, we're talking about an icon, a famous gentleman in this city that folk have been dead over 20-some years. And would you believe folks still miss him? They need him. He was a real man. When I say man, I mean he was a man's man. He couldn't fight a lick. He would tell you that in a minute. He couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. But he could talk you up a bridge and down the street and around the corner. Couldn't nobody out-talk Mr. Petey Green. And joining us is Clayton LeBuff and my beautiful co-host, Nikichi Taifa. And we're sharing memories about Petey, reminiscing about this gentleman who left such a big impact on this city and still affecting the city. Even after he's gone, he's having an impact. That tells you what kind of individual this gentleman was. And again, I'd say he was the most honest human being I've met. That includes judges, senators, congressmen, the president that I've met, all that. Nobody came across as honest to me as Petey Green did when he got himself together, when he straightened out. If you stunk, he would tell you, you stink, go get some bath, take some soap. He didn't care who you was, he would tell you just like it is, like that little song. You can't hear this now, but we've been playing a song on the air, Clayton, by Tony Woods, and it's called Stop Signifying. Or tell it to the hot, tell it to the cold, tell it to the young, and tell it to the old. Don't want no lying, no crying, and most of all, no signifying. So Tony Woods did a song, and it's called Stop Signifying. We can't hear it now, but it's been playing at the half-hour breaks and at the end of the show. So listen to the song, and it's written for this movie called Adjust Your Color.
Yes, my brother Terrence helped produce.
That's right. He sure did. Terrence was a co-producer.
And he was able to get Tony, you know, you know, some of the soundtrack, you know, to the documentary. I saw Tony. Hey Tony, if you listen, I saw Tony 2 days ago. He came out to a play that I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But listen to the song at the end of the show. The song was written for the documentary called "It's Just Your Colors," the real life of Peter Green. So it says some of the same things he said. Tell it to the house, tell it to the cold. But that's the song that we be playing periodically on the station.
Well, he was the kind of brother that comes from the oral tradition, a rapper.